Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I'm sure people may be wandering in, and we do have an audience on Zoom as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. On behalf of the Watertown School Board, I'd like to welcome all of you and especially thank you for participating in this first of 3 finalist candidate meet and greets, an opportunity for you to meet the candidates for superintendent in your district and ask them questions. I'm Pat Neudecker. I'm the facilitator for the evening as a partner with Hazard Young and Atia, who's conducting this search for the board. The format for tonight will include an introduction of our finalist, who will then really introduce himself and tell you a lot more about himself than I ever could. And then we will also be asking you to submit questions via the note cards that are on your tables. And for those of you participating with us on Zoom, you can put your questions in the chat room. And I will be organizing and fielding those questions. It helps us keep moving. If I can watch the questions, put them together if there's some that are similar, and usually not, but if there's anything that is personal or inappropriate, we probably would overlook that question. For those on Zoom, please add that to chat. For those of you that have questions here, you can put them on your cards and we will pick them up. No names will be used. So I know even on Zoom, your name is probably showing on the screen, but we will not use names when we read your question. And then at the end, we'd like to do a quick candidate wrap up where our candidate will summarize, I guess, their time here in the district today or any final comments. And I'm going to ask your permission and your help in letting him exit quickly. He's going to tell you, but a busy guy, he has graduation tonight. So we're going to get him out of here and on his way where I know normally he would stay and visit with you. So thank you for that. I'll remind you too that next Monday and Wednesday will also be another presentation just like this where you will have the opportunity to meet your great candidates. But with that said, it brings me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ryan Krohn, who's with you with great interest in the Watertown School District. Ryan.
Well, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thanks everybody for joining us here tonight live as well as online. My name is Ryan Krohn. I am currently superintendent of the Stone Bank School District located in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. It's one of the smaller school districts in the state. Prior to that, I was the assistant superintendent in the Waukesha School District, the 7th largest school districts in the state. I've had about 25-year career in education, most of it in Waukesha County as a teacher and a coach, assistant principal and a principal, and a couple of unique paths in terms of getting a chance to open the Waukesha STEM Academy, which is a charter school based off of a grant a number of years ago. And in a little bit of a short time, I got a chance to step out of a formal role of schools and I did some consulting. I was the director at the Institute, and our work there was to help school districts push for more student-centered programming, help push their policy, everything from policy level to practice level in the classroom. And I had a chance to do that for a few years and work alongside a number of districts across the state. So with that being said, I'm really excited to be here today, to have spent an amazing day here throughout the district and get a chance to apply for the opening for superintendent. I believe that Watertown is not only a fantastic district, but positioned for continued greatness into the future. And I look forward to answering questions tonight and getting a chance to have some dialogue.
Maybe for the sake of, especially our people on Zoom, do you want to add anything else about your interest or highlights of your day? Or
yeah, sure.
If you'd like to, sure, go ahead.
Got a chance today to spend some time getting immersed in the school district. Started at being at the district office or the Educational Service Center and got a chance there to meet the district team. A number of people that play a lot of roles at that service center, everything from finance to providing student services, HR development, as well as teaching and learning. Just getting a sense of where the district is in terms of what the role the district plays is great. From there, we got a chance to go on tour. We got a chance to be in every single building today, got a chance to meet each of the building leaders and principals, many of the teachers, a lot of high fives and thumbs up from students in the hallway. But getting a chance to go inside of every building, get a chance to kind of see the people that have made up the stories that I've heard from afar. I've heard great things about the people that have made up the success here in Watertown School District, and we get a chance to hear and meet some people. We got a chance to see really an investment at this time of year, and the energy still going full throttle in the classroom. So we got to see students continuing to work. We got to see teachers sharing a lot of the progress and success that they're having. We got to hear our administrators talk about the goals that they've achieved, as well as what their sights are set on for next year. Getting a chance to see a full spectrum from 4K programming that has been in the district or just beginning to sort of emerge as a program all the way through to high school, where students are talking about their last couple of days in school and some of their capstone graduation projects, is something special to see from an outsider looking in, and to see a whole K-8 spectrum in terms, or K-12 spectrum in terms of the work that's unfolding. Also had a chance to see some things that are, I would say, are part of this really special portfolio here in Watertown. And what I mean by that is there are traditional schools such as an elementary school, middle school, high school. But if you really turn the page, you get a chance to see that there are a number of charter schools in this district, from an online school and a project-based school, or here in this high school as well, including Endeavor. You get a chance to meet people that will help to orchestrate those schools and those services and the reasons why. Got a chance to see some of the STEM programming that's unfolding at the middle and the elementary level, as well as a dual language program. One of the highlights today at the middle school is we got a chance to meet with an 8th grade teacher who was talking about her 8th grade students leaving this year with the first cohort of that dual language group that had made their way all the way from kindergarten through to 8th grade. And they're really celebrating the success and the growth of that moment, how that investment 8 years ago was playing out and seeing students today leaving 8th grade. So those were many of the highlights. Beyond the school visits, I did get a chance to meet with some community leaders back at the Educational Services Center this afternoon, and got a chance to hear about partnerships with the health department, partnerships with YMCA, partnerships with local universities, as well as other organizations.
And I'll remind all of you, if you have questions, even if you think you know the answer, you might ask it anyway, because it's very helpful for our participants on Zoom to be able to hear. I'll make sure I can represent this correctly. Okay, here's our first question. Ready? If the Watertown Unified School District School Board wants to do something that you disagree with, whether it has to do with safety, curriculum, health, or anything in general, how would you resolve the disagreement?
In terms of running our board meetings, one of the most important things that we do is make sure that we're really transparent with our processes and communicating to the community, as well as sort of how about we go about our decision-making practices. And so in that piece, making sure that our agendas are clear so that the community understands topics that are being discussed, making sure that there's opportunity for conversations to take place at a board level in terms of what's a discussion or what's informational item, what's a discussion, and what's eventually going to be a vote. Our goal there is also help community understand how boards function and how boards work in terms of decisions that boards make. And last but not least, in terms of having opinions on these things, I think the important thing is to really make sure that we have really good, we have a chance to hear all the perspectives on every topic, and make sure that's included in the process before decisions are made. And once decisions are made, that really gives us a new starting spot for the future conversations if they're necessary.
Great. Now I'll encourage people who are joining us on Zoom to please put their questions in the chat room, and we will field them for you. And also our audience participants, if you will, too. I know Dr. Krohn would love to be walking around with you, but we've asked him to stay on camera. So he, I know, is more comfortable out here conversing with you, but we'll mention that for everyone's benefit, because it's easier for the Zoom folks to see as well. Any other questions? Anything else? Other questions? Well, I can ask one. How do you balance all of the, what sometimes appears to be competing interests and needs for what everybody thinks students should know and be able to do, with what we really know from research and best practices, what makes a high school or a school district great? Yeah. How do you do that?
As we look at sort of the program or the classes that we want students to take, and sort of that piece, that's the student experience that we want to look at. And as a school district, we want to look at what's the avenue that we want students to have. What I got a chance to see today was a variety of pathways a number of students that could be looking at taking everything from AP honors classes and looking at a 4-year career, to others that were looking at getting early accreditation for moving into industry and work and likewise. So to really balance that, one of the things I think Watertown has as a gift is really a portfolio of pathways and really programs that offer that piece. So that right there, that's I think a real strength. But in terms of really balancing that piece out of what are some key priorities, I think it is important to really establish our key goals as a district in terms of achievement or programming or offerings. We call them our key performance indicators or some of our key markers, but really establishing what do we value. That becomes clearly defining what we offer and why we offer it. And then really as a team, really sort of having an opportunity for students and teachers to decide how we can get there, how we can build programs that might do that in that work. So there are a number of priorities, and sometimes you'll get a lot of feedback, and that's a really important channel to do that. At the same time, when ideas come in, we have to be able to put it into a process that we can discuss it. And does that go in? So if it's a new science program that might be coming in and people are thinking about this is a new topic, this is an area that we should be looking at, we want to have a nice process to have that go into looking at it annually to make sure, are we adding courses? Is this something we want to do? How does this fit into existing courses? And is there a removal of other competing priorities? We had some local interest in that this year. We have used many of the Project Lead the Way programming models for a long time, and we found some nice success with it. We also found, I've shared this example in the past, but we found a new drones program happening at a couple of universities, Whitewater and Carroll University. And what's really interesting about that is we're seeing that has turned into not only a minor, but a major at universities, and even complementing so many different industries. That was an area that something came in new, and we took time to explore it, look at how did that fit into our existing Project Lead the Way STEM and science curriculum, and how would that fit? Were students interested, and what were some of our outcomes with that? From that spot, though, we also found some areas that maybe were a little bit outdated and that we wanted to kind of have a replacement and a choice. So we successfully implemented it this year, and we're excited about the partnership that it formed. And in the end, we found out that it complemented a number of our classes really well, and it was a nice fit. And with the engagement that we got from students, it took off. So we had to be careful with an idea coming in, not to just sort of have a wall that we couldn't get past it. At the same time, we had to be careful that it wasn't just open or things were just coming in that we didn't have time to really fully vet and understand and approve at a board level. So we knew what was coming in and that we could really do it well.
Another question. What drew you to pick Watertown Unified School District?
This one's a pretty easy one because it stood out. I mentioned before, I'm at a relatively small district right now as superintendent. I also previously was at a large one, Waukesha School District, which is a larger one. When I started to look and heard about this position being open, I got a chance to take even a deeper dive under the programmings and offerings that are here. So what's interesting is that 3 things stood out really clearly, which was the programs in and of themselves really stand out in terms of saying we have an extensive high school program, middle and elementary, but we also have, again, charter school programs, project-based programs, environmental programs, dual language, AP programs, a number of programs that had just sort of beyond. And that's a really exciting piece in terms of a culture for a district to have sort of an innovative portfolio and to say, we're willing to continue to look at things now and into the future. Another piece was practices. So with programs and practices, and that was really where, what were the instructional strategies that were being used, or what were some of the leadership practices that were being used to really engage staff and students? Because I kept hearing about sort of the strategies that were being used inside the classroom. If you've been on the website and watched the video, or if you got a chance to tour like I did today, it was clear that active learning, highly engaged learning is something that's valued in this system. And you saw students really own their learning experiences time and time again. And that was a really nice piece to see in terms of the role and the importance of the role that student plays in the learning process. And that was a culture piece that is rare to see. And when you see it, you know it. The last piece that has really stuck out is the people. And I have some smaller relationships with individuals in this community, but one of the things that has stood out was the number of times when you talk about, or I listen and hear stories about Watertown, was the people that made it great. From not just educators and people in the district, but also parents, students, community leaders, business leaders, a number of services around there. And we kept hearing about this is a wonderful, supportive community, but then you start to hear the stories behind that. One of the meetings that we had today, we just heard about the number of services behind the scenes to support different programs, pieces, to understand not just individual families in need, but even collective families in need, and sort of that piece. So again, the programming that is there is a draw and really got my attention. The practices that I uncovered in sort of getting to know the district were really, really exciting to see. But the piece that continues to grow on me are the people that have been a part of this system now, people that work here, that have gone to school here, people that continue to talk about 2 or 3 generations of their kids and families in this town is something that is really special to watch. It's also a piece that as the future comes in and every district faces different challenges along the way in the future, it's also one of those pieces I believe is essential to addressing challenges and successfully addressing challenges in the future, is to have a really strong community and people that really know the town and have been a part of it and understand it, as well as having a portfolio in the past of good practices that you've done and big changes that you made in the past, so that that can continue as a culture in the future.
Those questions coming in, please.
Here's another one. Great. What is your experience supporting programming for multilingual learners and families?
Prior to my current role, I was the assistant superintendent in the school district of Waukesha. About 10 years ago, we had looked at a pretty significant need in terms of programming that we did not have at the time. We did not have dual language 10 years ago, 11 years ago in school district of Waukesha. We had a pretty big opportunity to look at how we were going to continue to serve kids and sort of address some of the challenges that we were facing as a system. Since that time, we started and we looked at it from an elementary model first, but Higher, Blair, and Banting, 3 schools were identified as becoming a dual language school. And we started similar to what has occurred in this district with looking at a 90-10 model, a one-way model or a 2-way, but eventually as the program grew, it really turned into a model that is there. From there, taking time, and I shared in my opening that where it had gotten to here in this district, celebrating the 8th grade model, growing that program also grew interest in the community of really understanding the value of being of a dual language program for all students, for the community. At first, it went from what does this program look like and what does this mean for my school, into schools right now that have students driving, families to get there, having wait lists to get in, really understanding and seeing that being being a part of this dual language program really was a value add for their young children, was really going to lead their students to be able to speak fluent 2 languages. So that was an area that we started from a programming model. It made its way through middle school, made it through high school, and in the end, we've really established, and I did learn about it here in this district, as well as having a seal of biliteracy at graduation, and really recognizing the gifts and talents that students have, and really taking a look at a really innovative, inclusive model to be able to have students see their gifts recognized and to bring forward a chance to bring really what would be a whole new program to a district. But to do it in a way that is really a value add to the community and the future workforce.
Keep those questions coming in as we read yours. Dr. Krohn, what are some of the first steps that you will be addressing in this school district? What are your top 3 priorities?
So early on in this process, got a chance to look at the leadership profile that was done through the consulting group, and just take a chance to get initial feedback. Most important piece in transitioning to a community is to really to develop an understanding of really what's there. And so again, I'm going to go with programs, people, and processes, but really heavy on some processes as well. And what I mean by that is really, first of all, just get a chance to understand the programs that are in place and just what are they, what level are they performing at, where do they come from? And that's everything from schools, math programs, literacy programs, as well as just community programs. So getting a list of programs that are there and really getting to know and understand what's happening. 2 is people, and really getting a chance to work alongside. Today I got a chance to meet with some of the cabinet team, getting a chance to understand where the district is at, getting a chance to form relationships with the school board, getting a chance to form relationships with other community partners. So getting to know people and really listening, I'd say listen large, but to really listen in a manner that we're getting a chance to hear different work on that. And then processes. What are the processes for decision making that have been here in the past regarding finances? What are the processes that we have for safety and communication and engagement? What are the processes that we have for decision making? Just trying to follow the history of that so that there's a level of predictability in terms of communication and those things. So in the end, coming in relatively new, it is really, the goal is to gain perspective from multiple people in the system, and what is the different perspectives that people have in terms of the current state of where things are at. Imagine that being, and generally a superintendent will have a 100-day plan in some way, shape, or form, but in doing that in concert with the school board to say 100 days from now, if we run a chance to do kind of an audit of just some programs and get some feedback of getting to know people and getting to know the processes, coming forward at that time and really sort of being more informed to say, okay, well, was a new transition in, but here's what we've heard, and how does that help us understand where we're at, and then how does that help clearly define the next steps in terms of where we go. And so that coming in new is really a chance to hear perspectives as we really do that. And again, they all start with the letter P, but just getting to know people, programs, and processes. But real goal is to get the perspective of where things are at in the current state, so we can understand then how do we approach each piece we're going for in the future.
Another question from our video audience. What would your focus priority be to increase enrollment in our district?
So I'm a firm believer that there's huge impact happening each and every day for students, classrooms, for schools. And one of our important things to do as a school community is to share that as loud as we can in terms of the programs that are happening, the great results that we're getting, what we're doing for students, how students are forming everything from relationships and friendships to having an outstanding educational experience in this school district. So one of the key pieces is to make sure, I'd say that from a messaging and communication message, that we're not shy about the great things that are happening, and we get a chance to celebrate the impact that we can have in kids and families' lives. And so I would look at that from a sort of a marketing and PR standpoint, and where are we doing that well, and where can we continue to go? The other piece for looking at enrollment is just to continue to, and it kind of goes hand in hand, but just to define it collectively as often as we can, what is the Watertown experience for students? What is that experience, and how do we get people in the door to have that experience? So currently we're doing a lot of marketing around looking at starting up our 4K program, and we've been targeting a number of parent-child events that we can do in our community for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, just to get families in the door, to form some of those initial relationships, to start to have art and family nights, start to have open gyms, to start to have read-alouds in the library, all of those kind of things to just get sort of those initial relationships going, where they can meet a teacher, meet a staff member, be in the school, and start to understand. At the same time, there are families that will choose to be in schools because of sometimes they have an assumption about this school would be that or that. It'd be the other piece would be to formally just to start to look at who's in our area that's not coming here, and to start to find out why. Is it a programming piece? Is it a work piece? Is it childcare piece? Is there some other gaps or some barriers that are that we're unaware of? Then last but not least is really just having as many opportunities as we can to have what we call open doors, open forums, and just opportunities to engage families in forming relationships that we want them to have with our district. And so we've run open enrollment fairs in the past. We've really looked at making sure that the marketing is out there in terms of getting families in. We have found that sometimes people don't know that they can go here if they're out of district. We have found that sometimes people don't know where their boundary is, or that they go to another spot. So it's just sometimes there's just an education piece as well in terms of where we're at. So all in all, there's a lot of marketing that would go into it, but I really think that the best marketing is a story of the impact that we're having in terms of great programming. I was in one conversation today that somebody explained the experience that they had with their daughter in school, and how it was sort of really high level, top notch, and opened some doors that the employee said that they only knew it because they went here. And the storyline behind it is, imagine if they didn't go here, do other families know that this class is here? Do families that don't go here know that there's this program in this district? And so that really comes back at that, really doing our job to put out the information, not only to enroll in the school, but to talk about the impact that we're having.
And piggybacking on those questions about enrollment, what is your perspective concerning Wisconsin choice programs such as open enrollment, charter, and vouchers?
Yeah, I think over the last decade, there's greater and greater decision-making happening inside of households of where they're going to go to school. For a long time, it was where do you live, or where's your address, and where's your either local neighborhood school, and that's where you're at. Since there's been a greater, and I mentioned the strength of having a portfolio of options and programs, but since there's been more and more options, you're seeing more and more people have conversations about where they might go to school. I do believe that inside there are people that are choosing to go to different spots and might not just take for granted their neighborhood or their local district where they live, but it also inside there, if we can understand the conversations that are having that people want, it's a great opportunity to understand what people are looking for and draw programs from there. About 13 years ago, I had a chance to open the Waukesha STEM Academy. It was a new charter school. What was interesting about that moment was at that time, it was the first time that a STEM programming model came into that school district where I was at. And what was interesting about that is we opened it in a building and we had 1,300 students apply to be a part of that. And there's a couple storylines in there. We had a wait list, we had to get a second building. But what was interesting behind the scenes on that was at the same time that happened, what we recognized is that we were promoting that school at this level. It was new, here's what it was going to do, here's what learning looked like, here's what we were going. We had open houses, but we weren't doing that for a lot of our other schools. And what's interesting is we overeducated the whole community on here's what it was. And we hadn't been doing that probably for the last decade in terms of our other schools. And we didn't celebrate the way. What happened, and the silver line on that happened after that was all of a sudden our game was raised for everybody else to celebrate the great things that are happening. And so instead of looking at just it was one thing, we made sure that we celebrated everything. And that was a great area to just do our part in highlighting those programs, but also just really pushing onto what did people need to know to be informed. So coming back to charters, vouchers, choices, magnet schools, or whatever they are, I think the better job we do is sort of marketing and getting in the hands of families, since they are making choices, let's help them be informed of the choice they're making.
Great. Would you please let us know your thoughts about transparency with parents about curriculum?
So big topic this year in terms of just really people wanting to have trust. Trust is one of our biggest pieces that we can do for our community. Trust some good processes, from everything from finance to even trust right now in terms of curriculum and what's being taught and approved. So annually, every year when we approve standards or we approve curriculum, those are always what all school boards will have a chance to do. And so we want to make sure we have clear processes of where people can sort of get a chance to review material and understand what's being taught in schools. What's interesting is over the last number of years, most districts, when it comes to a topic such as like human growth and development, have a pretty clear process for getting materials adopted, reviewed, and having parents know what's being taught. Right now, especially over the last year, we're having more people saying we want to be informed of what's happening at a little higher detailed level. Some of that came with COVID when people were hearing lessons and seeing things online. Some of that just came out of more curiosity, and some of it came with just a lot more transparency of online learning, people seeing things. So it is critical that we do our part to establish what is within our range in terms of what's adopted for curriculum, what materials we are using, and things like that. The challenge is going to be, and you can do the math on this, and you think about 100 teachers in a building teaching 8 lessons a day. Right now, we're going to have 800 lessons a day, and then by the end of the week, we're going to do the quick math that a few thousand lesson plans happening. So the other piece on trust is going to be to really establish how do it won't be possible to monitor every single lesson every single day. It will be important that as a district you establish the parameters in terms of this is what's taught. There's a big piece about the word indoctrination comes in a lot of that, and that's really important to talk about how are things presented. So when things are presented in this category with social studies, science, or other things, that it's clear about what's being taught as well in terms of how it's being delivered. So there's an expectation on that. So again, I think the questions are really valid of people wanting transparency so that there's nothing to hide. The challenge is going to be down to the daily lesson detail to make sure that there will be some mistakes. How do we minimize that, or how do we give a framework for this is how things are taught or when it is? And so there's great examples of being transparent, and then we've got to make sure we just continue to have an understanding of what that could be from material selection. And I will say it has gotten a little bit tough with people finding great resources online that look like a nice complement to something, and then the next thing you know, it was a little bit maybe wasn't aligned, wasn't approved. And so there's really going to be a sense of finding good parameters for that, so that there builds trust with it's not just anything off the shelf or off the internet, and it does follow sort of the district standards or curriculum.
Shifting back to programs, what steps might you take to measure the success of educational programs to make the most impact on our kids? And I'm going to add the second piece. And would there be a situation that would cause a district to discontinue a program?
So that's a great question. We want highest achieving literacy program, most effective math programming. Our question is going to be is what have we determined to be success in that? What is the measure? Is that all students at this level? Is that a group of students having access to this level of coursework? Defining that measure is really important in terms of what we see success as. And there's different ways that we could look at that. The other piece on the programming piece is defining the level of engagement that we want students to have. So there's a number of different math programs that are out there. So are we investing on, again, is it an overall composite score for a district? Is it the number of students qualifying for AP classes, or what does that measure for what does success look like? At the same time, one of the things for programming is so defining that success and really trying to adhere to it, knowing that we're either hitting that success or that we have a plan to track for it is important. One of the pieces that some work that I do, and I work with school districts on continuous improvement models, is sometimes student achievement is a lagging indicator, and the leading indicator is that program and how well it was adopted, how well there's been support and training for teachers, how well it is, and if it's effective or not. So really going into that side of it is important as well. So we can say on the surface, boy, we're not getting the results that we have right now, maybe for a math program. And then we could look at it, and more often than not, we'll find, well, staff turned over this many people in the last 5 years, which means nobody got the initial training when it came in, or there hasn't been maybe some ongoing support on how to look at achievement data and how do we put that in there. So there's a little bit of recognizing not just the results and throwing a program out until you get a chance to also do a program review. Today I got a chance to just haphazardly ask a couple people I met in the hallway. I know that you're a district that uses the STAR assessment, and then the window just closed. So it's sort of that 2-3 times a year getting a chance to look at student growth and results. And I just asked somebody casually, they said they had it in their hands. I said, how's it going? And what kind of results are you seeing? And they really had their report they were carrying with. So that's a really good indicator of a local measure that's being used to see what success looks like. In terms of, I heard about a growth score today. I heard about the achievement score today. And that's a really exciting piece. A deeper dive on that beyond just the score was what was happening also in a school maybe where you're not getting the results. How did people feel about the support they were getting, the materials, how old they were, and things like that. So I'm careful to not throw something out when the score is not where it wants to be until we get a chance to understand where the understanding is or the resources of the support. But both of those look together. If you're not seeing the scores and you feel like the program that there, it is time to sometimes move to the next thing. But no matter what you go to, you will want to make sure that you have a really good model in place to help the adoption process get started, because even starting something over sometimes is a whole nother step, and rather than just sort of reinvesting in the understanding of the goals of what success looks like for students and what we want.
Technology. What role should technology have within the classroom?
Hope to continue to position technology as a resource for students in their learning journey. Not as necessarily the driver of it, but as a resource to sort of assist them. We've all got doused with technology the last couple of years as things kind of shut down, and we realize that there are some real benefits, everything from being unable to be here tonight to be able to be on Zoom, as well as to find some other resources quickly for what we're working on. But we want to make sure that it's complementing the learning journey or is seen as a resource. So again, having books and materials accessible for students in the learning journey is great. And so there are models that districts use. One is called SAMR, which is where technology is just a substitution for a piece of paper. You're just doing it online. That's the substitution level. And then there's a chance where it's just really starts to move into where it's modifying the assignments, even redefining the experience. And sometimes when you're getting up to the R and SAMR, you're getting a chance to a redefined experience using technology. Today I heard about a school when I was touring it that was using technology for a virtual cow or calf that was adopted by the school, and they got to do that virtually and sort of track this. Probably not a good idea to have that cow in the school, in the environmental school that we heard about, but the one that they had was they had a chance to adopt it and learn about its growth and its feeding and things like that. That is a great redefinition of technology and the use of it in terms of the work that we're doing. But in terms of just having students sitting in front of materials or just having their technology in front of it and not interacting with peers can really be detrimental to sort of the turning and talking and sharing and listening that we want to have. So got to be careful with how we use it, but at the same time, there are some great benefits to enhancing the learning experience or opening up doors that might not have been available. At the same time, we don't want to replace really students turning and talking, building and creating and being a part of it.
Thank you. Should a situation arise where an administrator has transgressed, what process or steps would you take to address that?
It's critical that for everyone in our organization, we have really, really high expectations and standards. And I would also complement that with a high support. And so if we are at a spot where we're not seeing a spot where we're seeing success, or we're starting to see that from a support system, we've got to try to figure out what can we do to support this model, and can we get it to where it's expected to be. And at the same time, if we can't, we have to put steps in place. And so over the last number of years, I've had to engage in conversations with like this in different districts and different times in terms of performance. And so we established, I mentioned our KPIs, our key performance indicators, as a district a number of times. I have put in a system of quarterly artifact checking with a group of principals. I've also put it in for teachers and for schools. And what we did is we established really what our plans were, strategic plans for the year. And then every quarter, we did public reporting out by school and by leader in terms of the work that they were leading, how they were pushing on really hitting our targets for achievement, how they were helping to hit key initiatives for the district, and how it was unfolding. We're listening for progress reports. We did that publicly, sort of like imagine having schools present in front of other schools. We gave each other feedback. But it also was a chance to have really clear expectations and see the quality across the system and across different leaders. And it became sort of, we could see where we were about benchmarking in terms of work. And then from there, we could really have conversations where the benchmark wasn't being hit, could find out what kind of support was needed because the expectation was there. At the same time, we could also find out that there was a chance to sometimes have people removed from the role, sometimes have their role be redefined or be reassigned or things like that. But I try really hard to be really clear on what the expectations are, whether it's for students in the classroom, whether it's for teacher performance in the classroom, whether it's for principals or for myself, but really having a spot to define that, have a chance for artifacts, conversation, discussion for that, so that we have the high expectations and high standards. And then at the same time, when it's not there, have a process that we can keep an eye on that. And I mentioned the quarterly model that we do, but really I put that in for about the last decade of just because that, to me, that becomes a live moment of pause of the artifacts we wanted to see. And for the most part, and this is the best part, is for the most part, those are celebration moments. So if you're doing that with a group of 20 leaders or school team, you're seeing highlights from the year and success and celebrating periodically throughout the year. At the same time, it does give you an opportunity where you're not to address that before we go too far into the school year or down the wrong path.
Great. Just a reminder, we probably have about 5 to 8 minutes before we'll give you a little wrap up so you can get out of here on time. So I'm going to combine a couple of questions so that everybody hopefully will hear their need or have their need met. One is about communication. What principles of communication, PLES principles, would you follow for transparency and communication with the community?
I have a little framework that I try to use around communication. It's a challenge to myself. So pick a topic, any topic, and I try to ask myself in terms of, well, where does that how is that topic being communicated? And I'm not talking just one-way communication, but I'm talking about real communication and real engagement. So I call it inform, involve, and impact. And it's a model that I try to really use, which is at a minimum, we need to have our staff, our community informed of these topics that are unfolding. So simple information from everything from website to the district app, to paper, to flyers, whatever it would be. So that's the basic level. The second layer is where I really think of like, well, so informed and involved. So who needs to be involved in this conversation that's not right now? So really trying to be transparent and have opportunities for involvement. So everything from ongoing listening sessions, being public with staff, getting a chance to connect with the community, having open forums is critical, and it's essential to any topic, because there's always people that are looking to be a little bit more who should be involved, who's not involved, do we have the right perspectives? And so that's sort of layer 2. So inform is just sort of one way, we're hearing things, they're hearing things. 2 is this is a topic that requires some real involvement, and what forums do we have for that? I run listening sessions every month. We run a number of committee meetings with staff. We run a number of parent sessions. And that's really our goal, is to get the right people involved and to make sure that our perspective is inclusive of everybody's perspective that they're trying to understand. And then the last layer, which is a little bit is the highest layer of impact. Who are the impact players in this conversation that really need to be in a position to have impact, to share their talents, their gifts? Who should be making these decisions? Who should be informing us at the highest level? So we have, again, a layer for that. Sometimes that turns into board committees or school committees. Sometimes that turns into deeper discussions and sort of that process, but you're getting a chance to really learn shoulder to shoulder with each other. So from a transparent process, I really try to follow that process so that there is an ability for a level of engagement for employees. There's a level of engagement for the community to be involved in decisions so that they can be a part of it. And there's moments where we know we're doing it well and we're getting that. And there's also moments where we look back on something that happened, like we needed more time to be able to have an impact team, or we had the wrong people on that, or we needed more time there. So let alone, we even established many of our board committee work in a rhythm that is happening on the first Monday, with community listening sessions and availability for myself daily to be able to hear that for that time in between, to make sure we're hearing perspective before we go back to full board meetings, just in case there's conversations that we want to make sure the door is open for that.
I'm going to read 3 questions, but I'm going to kind of cluster them around the bigger concept of school discipline, mental health of students, and school safety, especially with recent tragedies in our country. So one would be, how do you approach issues of school discipline programs?
Discipline programs, or yeah.
It said discipline program. I think discipline in general, student behavior.
Mentioned before some of our key performance indicators. As a district, we established school safety as one of our key areas that we were looking at, just tracking data to see what we would have. Really, for the most part, depending on what your context is, we looked closely at what our data was saying for past, everything from individual student behavior daily to some of the larger things that have been happening across the nation or that we have to prepare for. And we try to put a real plan in place. Our work in this piece was, again, to be really clear from the get-go about what the expectations are. From a simply put, if you're going to see me in a hallway, I'm going to say no student should be disrupting the learning experience of another student next to him, or disrupting the teacher from being able to do their job. So that's the bar, and I've never actually had anybody argue with me that's saying, no, I want my students to disrupt others from learning, or I want my students to disrupt the learning experience. So that's a pretty universal line. It usually goes over pretty well. The challenge is when we get sort of those repeat pieces, and what are the things that we need to unfold. So one of the pieces that we also looked at was in most schools, almost 80% of the students or more never end up having a discipline problem, having to go to the office or the principal's office almost in their entire career. And so we wanted to make sure we were investing on one end of the spectrum of really empowering students and recognizing the gifts that students are bringing, and also recognizing that that's generally the group that might be impacted by the behaviors that are taken away. So we really wanted to sort of put a model into what we called the Empowered Leader Program, into really establishing and investing the energy into that to recognize that piece. When it comes to discipline, though, when it comes to things that are compromising learning or even safety of a school or community, we are really clear on really establishing processes for what we can do to get to the root cause of this. Where is this behavior happening? Why is this happening? We have the things that can be a swift, you're out of school, it's a suspension, it's a potential expulsion. Those are things that are sometimes right there, but it's the ones that are repeated that really stick with the school or school community in terms of what other things are going on that are causing this pattern to occur, and what kind of supports do we need to get into. And we have seen things, everything from a real need to reach some health services. We've seen some other things that have been a real need to just form relationships with kids. And we try really hard to form that piece. And some of the questions that you'll ask are sort of like, sometimes there's a threat assessment on a bigger issue. But other times you ask yourself, where's the assessment of the student's level of engagement? Do they have best friends in school? Are they a part of any clubs? Do they have a teacher that they connect to? We try to find some of those pieces really to see what we can do or where we can begin. And oftentimes when we can start to chip away at that piece, or give the student a different role or a different relationship, you can start to get to the root cause of that. So all in all, from a safety standpoint, we have a pretty stringent crisis plan in place that covers all of the things that are scary to schools, from intruders and bullying and harassment, and some of those pieces that are really kind of just, this is what it is, and this is what we train staff to do and how to respond. We also have a chance to really invest in really the students that are just doing everything they can to bring their A game every day. And how do we recognize those students? And how do we set the tone for their learning experience to be, this is the expectation? How do we address things in the moment that for those one-time events that because they're young or they're middle school, they made a bad decision? But then there is sometimes that area of where do we need to invest to really engage a student to be successful long-term in our school and community? And do we have the right services and support? So it kind of takes a little bit of assessment, but we want a real line in the sand in terms of this is the goal for expectations. This is where they're going to be. And if it's disrupting learning, if it's disrupting other kids from learning, it's got to be addressed because that's why we're here.
And just to piggyback, how would you ensure that parents feel that everything is being done to protect the safety of their children?
Yeah, again, this is a tricky one because you want to have a real clear level of expectations that we're not going to cut any corners when it comes to that. Sometimes you can't get into the details of what a safety plan and protocols are for an entire district, but really knowing that there's routine drills, having open forums. We've run a lot with our Waukesha County Sheriff Department. We do a lot with internet safety in our school. This year alone, we added 3 new tabs to our crisis binder. One was internet and computer safety. With so many kids being online, we wanted to have an ongoing, that was something we were dealing with every hour, let alone thinking about intruders. We added sort of a social emotional piece for families just to make sure that families knew how to talk about topics that were coming up in schools and their community and just giving people resources. And that was done with a lot of our counselors. And then we did some other pieces just on some community forums in terms of just overall safety, school safety. That was just sort of things that they were thinking about, topics they were hearing so that they could understand there was a high level of expectation for discipline, that it wasn't disruptive, because sometimes what they hear in the car for kids is half the story. We want to make sure that there was a real piece there. And so we just, again, with parents, we want real public with those, but part of our monthly newsletters, and we also want to have forums to really do some parent education on that.
Thank you, our audience here and on Zoom, for letting me kind of combine some of those, so your questions would be heard. Just a couple left. I think maybe time for one more and then give you a couple minutes to wrap up, and we'll let you escape quickly. I'm glad we had so many questions. Ryan, when he got here, told me, well, I can always give my graduation speech if there's no question. So, which he also has with him for his next event. But and this kind of goes back to the school improvement and the things we started talking about in your picture of the total profile for students. But given that this school district has low ELA and math scores, under 40% specifically, where would you begin to increase growth in those areas?
There'd be a programming review that would really need to happen. What's the history of the programs that are being used right now in terms of training, adoption, and purpose, and where do they come in and where do they rest right now? There's always a kind of a current state of that. Like I always ask, in my office, I have an oar hanging on the wall. Like a paddle, but I have to use an oar because it's an acronym, and the oar stands for ownership, agency, and responsibility. And I think a lot about who has the oar in their hands in our system. I go into a classroom, I look at what the student role is and what's their role to move this journey forward. And I think of teachers, what do they have, what's their role in this? I look at our administrators, I look at our team. And I think about that in terms of, are we really clear on where we're going? And does everybody know the role and the importance of their role in getting there? And so when we look at a program review like performance, this is something that I thought about the minute I started thinking about this district, because of the conversation that I heard. It's really, I would walk into a classroom, I'd look at what's the role of our learners in our math classroom and what do we want it to be, or in our literacy classroom. What role are they playing actively in terms of, are we asking them to solve problems? Are they communicating with each other? Are they advocating for themselves when they're getting stuck? Things like that. What's the role of our teachers when it comes to this experience in terms of making decisions? Are they following a curriculum, or are they adjusting their curriculum based on students learning or not? Are they have ownership of the data? Are they recognizing the end of the week or the end of the, if a unit 4 exam occurred and it didn't get the performance that we wanted, what is the culture of the system or what we do next? Do we go on to unit 5, or is it a chance to really dive in and say, we need more time, we need more materials, and who owns that conversation in that moment? Because our system for that just continues to go on. So in terms of looking at this piece, I use this analogy a lot, but what's the role of the learner? What's the role of our educators in this? And really, what's been the role of our administrative cabinet in really understanding how we're going about fixing this? Is this something that we're looking at systemically? Are we reviewing data critically? And what decision-making processes do we have in there? So again, if a school board has established key strategic objectives and we want those goals and those scores to go through the roof, and that's our indicator. We want to get into this piece of really what's the work that's happening in our system and who has the ownership, agency, and responsibility for the adoption and the success at all three levels, and looking for that piece as we go. So it's a really important acronym for me as I think about that work, because as a system, whether it's a role of superintendent, we really want to look at, does everybody understand their impact and their need to have a good impact of us hitting our collective goals together. So that score for literacy and numeracy is not going to hit where we want it unless we're really clear as a system of what we're expecting from students and from families and from staff, and that we have that local sort of responsibility and accountability for that achievement. And then when we get there, we realize that our efforts matter. And that's really one of the best pieces of being on a team, is knowing the contribution of everybody mattered, and that people's that their efforts moved us to a collective spot.
We'll give you a minute or two to just wrap up so you can be out on time. I want to thank everybody for participating tonight, as well as the people that were with us on Zoom. There are a couple questions that we weren't able to get to. I did paraphrase some to hopefully get to most, but I will just pass the questions on to the board. So if they feel they're important, they can include them perhaps in their final interviews. So your questions will be addressed. Would you again help me in thanking Ryan, and then we'll also give you a couple minutes. Let's do that first. Let's give you a couple minutes and wrap up for us. It's been delightful having you. Thank you. Drive safely and have a wonderful graduation. So
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for taking time out of your schedule to be here. I had just a tremendous day getting a chance to see this district a little bit closer and kind of under the hood, so to speak. This work is in my heart and has been for every day that I've done this. I believe our job has changed a little bit in the last few years, not just of educating kids, but empowering them. So at the end of my signature on my email line, I always talk about educating and empowering kids for their future. And when I think about those two things, what I really hold to is educating them at a high level. What do we want students to learn, but also investing in them as a learner, empowering them, that they see themselves as a learner, they see themselves as capable, they see themselves as really ready to take on their next learning challenge. And so we think about, how do we nurture a powerful learner while they're becoming a highly proficient student, and sort of that piece. And it's something that I'm really excited about, because you never know the moment when a student starts to believe in themselves and has a disposition that they can do it. You never know that the skills that you need when you feel empowered to advocate for yourself, find a resource, take the next step. And so I really think a lot about not just the learning, but the learner. And today during my journey, I started by seeing the videos online when I started seeing what was posted on your website with every school. And they're all about kids. They're all about kids learning and doing something. But I saw it live today. And when I go into classrooms, still to this day, I don't really look at what the adults are doing. I look at what the students are doing. And you can tell a lot in that moment in terms of how they've been positioned. Are they talking to each other? Are they solving problems? Are they thinking? Are they sharing resources? They have a sense of ownership of this journey. And it was really fun today to see what I would say across the system of students who felt really comfortable in their schools, students who really understood their role of finding the just right book, advocate, talking at an appropriate level and engaging in a lesson. Even the hallways, being respectful as they're walking down the hall, but at the same time having a sense of this felt like home for those kids and the relationships that they had. So it was a real pleasure for me to get a chance to spend the day here. I believe our work is to educate and empower all learners for their future. And what's exciting about that is that there's great things happening in this district and great designs that allow kids to do both. It's not one or the other, but it's both, and it's that idea of why. So thank you for having me. Good luck in this process, and thank you so much. Good luck in the rest of the school year. You've got a few weeks to go.
thanks. We will let you escape, because I know
Yes.
you have
So
to
I'm
do
off
that.
Zoom, so
So please feel free to
yes,
exit as you need to.
I apologize. I have to run,
Yeah.
but
We understand.
graduation and my speech is ready.
Yeah.
So,
All
but I
right.
don't have to change. I'm in my suit. So
There you
it's-
go.
it's-
Yeah, be careful.
Thanks,
Take a breath.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much. Yeah,
You can run
thanks.
out.